and then we're going to get started. Okay. Perfect. All right, guys. So like I said, we're going to talk about the Spanish-American War. We're going to talk about more American imperialism, right? Like, is it really imperialism? Kind of how we were talking about yesterday, right? Conquering, colonizing, imperializing. And then we're going to get into at the very end, after we go over this stuff, because there's not a lot of material here, we're going to do a quick refresh on Unit 6 reform movements. So start thinking about reform movements during the Gilded Age. And we're going to do quick, like, fast facts about the DBQs, stuff to remember. I want to see where you guys are at on DBQs. And then depending on how well we do on the exam, we will decide if we need to take some days away from history, like history learning, to do some more writing days. If you do need help with writing and you know for a fact, like, oh boy, I need some refreshers on DBQs, do me a favor. And you don't have to do it right now, but send me a Teams message. And we can, if it's just one, like by the end of the day, we'll figure out something I'll make something for you guys to practice for. Like, I have it ready. I just didn't want to do it instead of taking away from learning history, because we're already kind of, I don't want to get us behind. So if you do need help though, and you want to work on it with me, let me know on Teams, and I will set a time where we can do that. They're like an office hours kind of deal. So let me know on Teams. You don't have to do it right now, but if you do think you want some refreshers on writing DBQs, just let me know. And with that being said, we're going to jump right into this and get started. So Spanish-American War, we're going to explain the effects. This is all about the effects. As much as I would like to go into the minutia of the Spanish-American War, there's not a lot there. It was a really short conflict. It was America flexing its powers, like the new kid on the block, like the fresh new boxer that just gets in there and beats up the old guy. That's kind of what this was. So we're going to get into all of that. First key point and only key point. There's only one key point, but there's slides to follow this. The American victory in the Spanish-U.S. War, or American War, led to the U.S. acquisition of island territories in the Caribbean, the Pacific, and increased involvement in Asia, and the suppression of a nationalist movement in the Philippines. This is important. So the Philippines are going to go through this nationalist movement where they are trying to get their own independence and freedom, and it's not going to work out, because essentially what's going to happen, and we're going to get into this in a second, but the Filipinos are going to think, hey, America's helping us from the, cruel, mean Spanish, right? Because the Spanish, obviously, kind of the worst, right? When it comes to colonizing, kind of rude, cruel. But then the Americans take over the Philippines, and then they're swapping the Spanish for the Americans. So the Filipinos are like, what? And then we're going to get into it. But it's kind of, the Americans pull the old switcheroo on the Filipinos, and it, got to fight another war in the Philippines, essentially, afterwards. That will be much longer than the Spanish-American War was. Okay, so about another minute and a half. Let me know if you need more time than that, guys. Again, thank you to everybody for getting in here on time. I know this is a little bit new. Make sure you are in virtual group 3. If you're not in virtual group 3, you should not be in this class right now. This class is virtual group 3. All right, gonna get ready to move on in about 40 seconds. So when we start, we're going to start with talking about why Americans are kind of interested in Spanish territory and Cuba and things like that. I know Cuba's not on there, but we're going to get into Cuba. So let's get started, right? So first of all, went too far. There's a bunch of American industrialists and businessmen that are interested in Cuba. If you guys don't know, Cuba is like 90 miles away from the southernmost point in Florida, right? You can almost see it from certain parts of Florida. So Cuba's good interest. It's a tropical island. There's a lot of natural resources. It's really valuable to a lot of these business interests in the United States. But Cuba is a Spanish imperial colony. So the Cubans in 1895 actually had just finished trying to fight a war of independence and losing to Spain. So that's why people are interested in Cuba, which is a Spanish holding. So that's where the, not tension per se, but issues are going to come up. There's going to be issues there for reasons we're going to get into. And something else you need to know, and this is really important, in the background, what's been happening for a while now and what's taking full hold here is something called yellow journalism. And what yellow journalism is, it was basically two groups of journalists, two competing groups, like the two largest groups, competing for more readers. The leaders of these de facto like yellow journalist groups were Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst. These are Pulitzer, Hearst, Pulitzer, Hearst. And they tried to get people's attention by publishing increasingly sensationalist stories. You guys know what sensationalist stories mean? What I mean when I say that, somebody tell me, either off mute or in the chat. What do I mean when they say sensationalist stories? What is that talking about? Like, define that term for me. That's a fancy, school term. What does it mean? A sensationalist story. What is it talking about? Somebody tell me. Come on, guys. I know it's 8 a.m., but we got this. What sensationalist? Maybe you don't know, just tell me. I don't know. I've never heard sensationalist before. Cavazos, you're going insane because it's 8 in the morning. Never heard of it? Okay. So sensationalist means really, really loud and extravagant and big. So I'll give you an example of something sensationalist, right? Let's say that I'm walking through the hallway and I hit my knee against the wall, right? I'm like, ow, that kind of hurt, right? That's just me being normal. But if I hit my knee against the wall and I'm trying to be sensationalist or make a big deal about it, I'll scream, I'll jump up in pain, I'll say, my foot's gonna fall off, and I'll like fall onto the ground. I'm like over exaggerating. Does that make sense? Sensationalist is another like kind of, it's not the exact same thing. They're not the same, but it's basically saying they're exaggerating on their stories. Does that make sense? It's to provoke, yes. So they're exaggerating, but they're doing it to try to get a rise out of people, to try to like get people angry or to get people sad or to get people happy. So a soccer player, that's funny. Kind of though, right? So like, but imagine that, but if they're doing it for a reason, right? So like sensationalist stories specifically, they're writing something that's an exaggeration, like a soccer player or a basketball player, right, trying to fake a foul, but they're exaggerating for the point of getting a response, right? So like, for example, if I wanted to make you guys, I don't know, feel bad for me, I don't know, for whatever reason, and I'd be like, man, I had to get up this morning and my dog had to stay home by herself. Right? Some of you guys might be like, oh, Cavazos' dog is by herself, right? And I'm doing that on purpose. I'm not being genuine, right? When in reality, like my dog's been by her, like my dog's used to the schedule. My dog has a schedule. You know what I mean? I'm telling you the truth, but I'm telling you my version of the truth. Does that make sense? Like I'm playing with the line, dancing around the truth, right? I'm kind of giving you the truth, but not really. And the reason I'm doing it is to get a certain reaction, right? And the reason that they're trying to get reactions from people is why? Why do you want people to have a strong reaction to what you wrote or to what you published or to what you did? What does that mean for writers that write newspapers? More views, right? You get more views, you get more readers, right? It's not, views is an excellent way to say it. You guys know like YouTube thumbnails, right? How they try to make you click on the video, right? Or headlines. It's the same concept. You're trying to get views, you're trying to get money, and this is the earliest version of that. Yellow journalism is the first time that people realize, wait a minute, I'm in the newspaper business. I need to make money. So clickbait. I'm going to try to get people to buy more newspapers. Said views for reading. No worries, you're good. I get it. But that's actually a really good analogy, right? Because in 2020, it's not so much newspapers, but it is people on YouTube with conspiracy theories, right? Or people on YouTube telling you, this is what really happened at, blah, 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 blah. And it's the same concept. Does that make sense to everybody? And yellow journalism is like the first step. If YouTube conspiracy theories is what's going on in 2020, yellow journalism is what's happening in 1890. It's the same kind of thing, only way less extreme, right? Because it's the first time it happened. So they're dancing around the truth. Don't forget about the dancing around the truth. Am I good to move on? Because I spend a lot of time talking about this. Clickbait YouTubers, yes, pretty much. They're like clickbait YouTubers. They're the blueprint of clickbait. I like that. Yes, pretty much. That's pretty much what they are. It's pretty much what they're doing. So if I'm good to move on, I'm going to move on from here. This is pre-war. There's no war yet, but America's and they're interested in Cuba. Yes, sir. Okay. All right, guys. So let's move forward then. Explosion of the USS Maine. So yellow journalists will embellish the atrocities that are being committed by the Spanish on the Cuban people, right? So it's not the 1500s anymore, but imagine that yellow journalists are saying, hey, they're doing what they did in the Southwest in the pre-Columbian, right? They're doing all that stuff. They're making it seem really, really bad. They're making the Spanish seem like evil bad guys. The public demand is starting to demand American intervention. You can't let the Spanish do that to these poor Cuban people, right? What about the Monroe Doctrine? What about, Latin American countries keeping them safe from Europe, all that stuff? So the public is going to demand intervention, and the U.S. will start to establish a naval presence around Cuba. They will send some of these new steel core, naval vessels to kind of be in the area, just kind of be like, hey, you're really close to America, Spain, like y'all need to chill. But what's going to happen is one of these battleships, and it's not a battleship yet. I shouldn't have put that, but couldn't resist. The USS Maine will explode in a Spanish harbor. So like when it's there near Spanish, forces, it will blow up. And before the cause or the reason could be established, yellow journalists will take this and run with it, claiming the Spanish ignited the explosion and destroyed the ship. Bay of Pigs. Wait, no, not yet. It's really similar. It's a really good analogy to make to the Bay of Pigs incident. Bay of Pigs, guys, is one of the reasons we had to get into Vietnam. It was very similar to this, another boat exploding. And this is, but the thing with this, and it's kind of the same with the Bay of Pigs, right? Once the investigation was done, the explosion was an accident. But by that time, it's too late. The American people are like foaming at the mouth to go to war with Spain. And so then the funny thing is, when we're going to get into it on the next slide, the reason we go to war with Spain is actually kind of funny. It's kind of silly. So pretty much. It's like rabies for war. I'll give you a quick minute and a half for this slide, and then we'll move on. But I want to make sure you have time to write for it. So we're going to move on in a second. But yes, it's the same. So it's very similar to how we get into Vietnam with the Bay of Pigs. The difference, I will say, is that unlike with Vietnam, where it's reluctant, it's kind of like, I guess, right? They hurt us, we got to kind of hurt them. There's forces in the background that really want to do this. Like all of the imperialists want to do this. They want Cuba. They want to kind of pick a fight with Spain because of all of the world powers that are still in the, around during this time. Spain's the weakest one. Spain is like, you know what I mean? If it's to go back to the boxer analogy, Spain is like 55 years old and still trying to be a boxer, right? England's still kicking. They're still kind of in their prime. France is still very much powerful. But the United States is like the 19-year-old boxer that's like brand new, barely trained, never really fought yet, but is fresh and ready to go, right? And Spain is the old. And I'm using boxing. I don't even know if you guys watch boxing anymore, but I'm using fighter analogies. But Spain is old. Spain does not have the power they used to, but they're still punching above their class because of all that power they used to have, right? And so it's going to come into play here, and you're going to see during this conflict that there's not much of Spain's not really powerful anymore. So what's going to happen is Spain being that old, so Spain being that older power isn't really afraid of the U.S. yet. So what happens is yellow journalists will demand war. President McKinley, make sure you name him. I put him in parentheses, but name him, will issue an ultimatum to Spain. Back off of Cuba or we will go to war. And Spain goes, okay, fine, we'll go to war. Like Spain agrees to go to war. And so then the war has to start. America's like, oh, all right. So then we go to war. That's literally how it happens. The slide switch. Yes, we should be moved on to the next one. Did it? You guys good, or did you need to go back? Good. Okay. Let me know if you need me to go back. But basically what happens is America threatens Spain, says, hey, back off or we're going to go to war. And Spain says, fine, we'll go to war over this. We're not backing up. So the war starts, and the war is really quick. Like, we're not going to get into the details of the war because it really has no impact. No one's really going to ask you about them. I'll tell you a quick couple of things, right? Basically, it's a fast-going war. It's new America's flexing their muscles, their technology, their resolve. This is where you see, if you guys have ever seen the khaki with the blue like uniform, this is the only war that's really in. That's Teddy Roosevelt, by the way, with the Rough Riders. He wanted to fight a war so bad that he quit his job as the Secretary of the Navy, I believe, and formed a cavalry division. And so these are like cavalry soldiers. And he actually did some fighting too. Rough Riders. But yeah, that's, so if you've ever heard reference to the Rough Riders, that's a photo of the Rough Riders. Those are the Rough Riders with their Springfield rifles and their old revolvers. Not what did they use? I think they use Smith & Wesson revolvers and their Bowie knives. Like, they're like, what's his KD? I don't know what his KD was. I don't know if he ever, I'm sure it's out there because he was very proud of it, but I don't remember. I've only read some Teddy Roosevelt stuff. I read it way back in college. I haven't read it recently. I probably should though. But he was very adamant about this stuff. He was, we're going to talk about him more later, but you could call him a warmonger and you wouldn't necessarily be wrong. The difference is he was very okay with it. He thought it was something that had to happen every now and then, right? Very famously, when his sons are fighting in the First World War, he'll throw a party every time he gets a letter from them talking about how they killed somebody, right? It's not until one of his sons dies in a plane crash in World War I that he stops kind of, what would be the term, like glorifying combat. Like, he thinks it's something you need to do. If you guys know anything about Teddy Roosevelt, he grew up like a very sickly child and no one thought he was going to live. Not that he loses his pride. He just, it hurts him a lot because it's like one of his younger kids. Like, his oldest kids are like on the infantry, and like I think it's like his third son dies, and it just like it breaks his heart, and he can't, like, he's never the same after, apparently. But he grew up dying. I forget what he had all the time. It slips my mind. But he grew up like a very sickly child, and everybody thought he was gonna die. So every day that he lives, like he's like the embodiment of being like a tough guy and being like a man's man and being like, he boxed in college. Like, if you look up Teddy Roosevelt boxing picture, he's like jacked in college, like chilling there boxing. Like, no one would be the same. Yeah, no one would be. You're right. And so, but my point to say that, and again, because I'm getting distracted talking about Teddy Roosevelt, but he's the type of guy that talked a lot about, hey, we should go to war, but he's also the type of guy that would say, all right, we're going to war, fine, I resign, and I'm going to go be a cavalry captain, right, and lead some soldiers in battle. And then he went and led soldiers in battle. So to his credit, he did kind of, put his money where his mouth was when talking about all this war stuff. One of my favorite Rooseveltian stories is one of his great-grandchildren is a general in World War II, and on the bumpers of his Jeep, because, the generals drive around in Jeeps, he had Rough Riders written on it, and that's what it's just fun stuff like that you read about. I think it's like Roosevelt the third or something. It's one of the Roosevelts. Anyways, U.S. wins the war. The war is fast and brief, but the U.S. gains a really effective victory, and they come out on the world stage, and they like proclaim this awesomeness, this power, this. Imagine if you're watching, I'm going to do boxing again. If the boxing stuff doesn't make sense, let me know. But imagine if there's a really established championship boxer or sports team, and some team or boxer you've never heard of beats them really quickly, like first round knockout, or it's like a blowout game where it's like 80-0 if it's like a basketball game or a football game. You'd be kind of shocked, like, whoa, where did these people come from? That's kind of how the world views this war. Spain is an old established power, right? They fought plenty of wars, they've held plenty of territories, and the US has the first round knockout. They beat them really quickly, and they take a lot of territory from it and all that stuff. Yeah, Devin, go quick. So I'll give you another like 30 seconds-ish on here. I don't think we need it, but just in case, because I've been talking a lot. I need to print out the schedule because I'm having to check it on my phone. I don't like pulling my phone out in class. But I will, what time? Oh, we're running out of time. Okay. So I can't stress enough, guys, if you want extra practice for DBQs to get ready, please send me a Teams message after class. So that way I can kind of compile everybody and we can see if we want to do something or if you just want me to just kind of send you a review thingy because we're not going to have time to do it in class and I don't think I'll have time in any of the classes to do it. So we're just going to do quick refreshers, but if you want actual writing practice, let me know. I know it sounds weird, right? Like, hey, you want to write more? Tell me, but like, it's practice. It's not going to be writing the full essay or anything like that. It's just practicing with sources. Effects of the Spanish-American War. We're going to get into the effects now. We're going to be there for a while. Cuba gains their independence as a result of the war. America does not take over Cuba, but when the Cubans are writing their new constitution, right? Because that's what countries do. The United States puts in something called the Platt Amendment. And the Platt Amendment means that the U.S. could intervene militarily if American economic interests were threatened, right? So anytime an American economic interest is threatened, the U.S. can send the military in and fix it. Basically, the new Cuban Constitution was linked to U.S. economic interests. It made it extremely difficult for the Cuban government to form and act in its own interests. So Cuba can't do what's best for Cuba because if they don't do what's best for America, America is going to come in and make them do what's best for America. Does that make sense? It's not quite the fairest deal. But again, imperialism. This is a different type, right? They don't take over the country, but they kind of do through, not trickery, but what would you say, like sneakiness. We'll go another 45 seconds really quick. About 15 seconds. Let me know if you need more time than that. All right, let's move forward. So let's talk about the Philippines. So after fighting a war with Spain, or during the war, I should say, the Philippines were being imperialized by Spain, right? Spanish were ruling it. They were kind of, being Spanish about the whole thing. But after the war, the U.S. will annex them for a small sum of money. I think it's like $22 million. During the war, the Navy will send out one of these new fleets to the Philippines, and they will bombard the Spanish fleet there. Once the fleet is destroyed, they will invade the territory, and with the Filipinos' help, kick out the Spanish. However, and the big thing is that the U.S. will take over the Philippines as an imperial power. So the U.S. will basically replace the Spanish in the Philippines. And after a short war where the nationalist groups that were fighting against the Spanish tried to fight against the U.S., the U.S. will defeat them and hold on to that territory until after World War II. And in fact, they're going to come up big in World War II where there's going to be, fighting between the U.S. and the Japanese over these islands because these islands are very far away from the United States. I'll give you a quick minute on there. These are the Philippines. That is a photo of American troops in the Philippines, I believe, fighting nationalists. Oh, sorry. A minute on there. Any questions so far, guys? We're doing good. About 40 seconds left, and then we're going to move on. All right, let's go and move forward. Why isn't my mouse working? There we go. So, American imperialism will continue and spread. We talked about in 1893, Queen, something I am not going to try to pronounce because I cannot, of Hawaii was overthrown. The Philippines and the American, that's a weird wording. So with the Philippines captured by the United States, with a Queen of Hawaii overthrown, the annexation of Hawaii will be done in 1898. And the reason for that is very clear. And I'm going to show you on a map that I'm going to pull up right now. Give me 1 second. Actually, we'll do this live. Here we go. Couldn't fit it on the slide. So this one should work. Wow, really? That's what I want. So if this ever loads, because my computer is taking forever. Oh, that's horrible. There we go. Okay. So these are the Philippines. I know it's hard to see because it's all blurry. And obviously this is the United States. They need something to kind of bridge the gap, right? So your Navy can make it over there so you can have resupplies in between. And those are the Hawaiian Islands. Everybody see that? Does that make sense? So the U.S. becomes incentivized to capture, or not capture, but annex the Hawaiian Islands, who now have no royal family to say, hey, no, don't do that. You never problem. Is it strange to look at? Like this is how the map breaks down. So these are the Philippines way up here. This is why, by the way, they're really easy to capture for Japan early on in the war because they're so far away from the U.S. These are the Hawaiian Islands, and this is the United States, continental U.S., right? The lower 48. Alaska's up here, by the way. So they're so far away, and now they're a part of the United States. And so in order to gap in between, the U.S. annexes Hawaii. So they have a base in the middle, right? That's why the Pacific Fleet, when we talk about World War II, is in Hawaii, because Hawaii is the base. It's the place where they go. Hopefully that made sense to everybody. So with that being said, let's go back to the slides. After that, American empire through economics will lead to an open door policy with China. And we will talk about that in a bit. China's a big fat mess right now. If you guys remember from world history, right? China is being, what's happening to China in the 18th century? And if you don't remember from world history, just tell me you don't remember. It's no worries. But try to think back. Do you remember what was going on to the Chinese and their interests? Being controlled. Yes. Opium problem. So Britain's controlling them. And it's not just Britain, right? What do the European nations do with China? What do they start cutting it into? What are those things called? Do you remember what they're called? Because they start splitting it up into little sections, but those little sections have names. And it's okay if you don't remember, but give it a second. See, do you remember what they're called? And if no, just tell me no. No worries. But it is because of the opium. You're right. That's part of what starts at the opium wars and all that stuff. It's good memories. No, we don't remember what they're called? All right. Not dynasties. Dynasties is what the Chinese called them. This is what the Europeans were doing to China. So let's get into it then. Let's talk about it. So we're going to move on here. I'm going to move on. That's a good guess, though. That is a very good, that's a good guess. So during this era, China is being taken over economically and carved into European spheres of influence. So make sure you rewrite down spheres of influence. That's really important. And what this, as this really racist portrayal will show you, right? You've got Germany, you've got England, you've got France, and I believe that is Russia. And I think this is supposed to be Japan, but Japan wasn't invited, so I don't know why Japan's in there. Carving up China into spheres of influence. That's what the sections are called. John Hay sends the open door note to the Europeans and says, hey, we want to have an open door trading policy privileges with China. And America is allowed to hold on to their trading rights in Asian markets. Basically, America wants to trade for free. They don't want to have to pay the fees or the taxes or anything associated with that. And they're allowed to do so due to these European spheres. There's like, we don't want a sphere. We just want to be able to trade. Does that make sense? We don't have to take a piece of China. We just want to be able to trade with China. Let me know if that doesn't make sense, and I can try to explain it a little better. All right, guys, about another minute on there, and then we'll move on from here. Talk about what we are doing next. About another 40 seconds. That's a really good point, because they are early in that area, you are right, and they do definitely want a piece of China, right? In fact, part of why there's that war, right, is because they try to take over parts of China and then they have to give it up, and they're not really happy about it, right? Europe's like, hey, you can't do that. We're going to do it, right? I think Oversimplified does that in one of their videos too, and they do a pretty funny job of it. But yeah, you're actually probably right. That is probably why Japan's there, because they do want a piece. They're just not really being allowed one, and they're in a position where they should's a strong word, right? But where there's no reason why they wouldn't be able to have one, and considering how Europe is carving it up. So that is a very good point, Jonathan. I had not thought of that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move forward. So now we're going to do our exam refresher. So this is going to be really quick. We've got about, 10 minutes left in class? Let me double check. Yeah, about 15 minutes. So we're going to spend about 5-10 minutes talking about refreshing for the exam. We're going to do some quick facts about DBQs. Use this time. If you need help with the DBQ, you want to do a little bit of writing practice, send me a Teams message, and I'll reach out to you on what you can do about getting some more practice in. So first, though, a couple of things to remember, right? Reference your documents. Can't stress that enough. Don't want to see none of your hiding your documents. You guys know that already. You'll have 7, answer the question, 60 minutes. The exam will be 60 minutes long. So when we come in, you're getting a link, 60 minutes. Don't worry about being late to your class. Take the full time as much as you need. I will let your teachers know, hey, they're taking an exam. So don't worry about being late. This is tomorrow, by the way, as a reminder, right? This exam is tomorrow. All this stuff is pretty fresh, so I don't think we need to spend a lot of time doing content stuff. Do you have any questions about the exam tomorrow for Unit 6? No? No MCQ, just one DBQ. That is it. No MCQ. No MCQ, no LEQ, no SAQ, just one DBQ. How many documents? So you have 7. I would say use no more than 3, maybe 4. Try to use like 3. Basically, form your answer to the question and then use the documents that help with your answer, right? And that's what you got to do. You got to do the proper context of the answer and things like that. So I would say use about 3. 3 is the sweet spot. I would not go over more. What I will do in a second is I will post on Google Classroom the link to the Heimler DBQ video. And I think it's like 15 minutes long, and he breaks down the whole DBQ rubric. Is it on AP Classroom? It is not going to be an AP Classroom. It's going to be through Illuminate, I believe. I will double check, but I'm pretty sure it is in Illuminate. No, it is in Illuminate. What am I kidding? I already set it up. Yeah, no, it's in Illuminate. It's not an AP Classroom. So you'll get it should load the PDF with the documents. And if it doesn't, let me know and I'll send them to you guys. And then you use the hour to plan and to write out the DBQ. I would say use about 3. Again, I'm going to post, I keep forgetting. I will post the Heimler video in a second. Do you have an exit ticket for today? Of course you do. Of course you do. We got about 10 minutes left in class, and of course we got an exit ticket. So what we're going to do now, and this is something, there's 26 of us in here. So I should be able to see all of you guys trying to put something in here. Tell me about reform movements in the Gilded Age. First, just name a bunch of them. So look back through your notes, check the slides on Google Classroom if you don't have the good notes. What were some of the reform movements in the Gilded Age? Try to remember them first before you look into your notes. Like, what were some? Do you remember? So like a reform movement's a change, right? Like change, typically, you would assign it to be a pop-up, like a change for the better. But what are some reform movements during the Gilded Age? Like, what were some of the problems in the Gilded Age? Worker unions is good because working conditions were bad. What else? That's really good. What else is in there? You can send a private, you can send a public, don't matter to me. But what are some other reform movements? Suffrage is a really good one. Women's suffrage, sure. Gilded Age reform movements. What else? What else? Not tolerance. No, can't give you tolerance. Something with a T, though. Come on, Jonathan's the only one that remembers these. Check your notes. What do you got? What do you got? Think about it. This is a big one. This is a really important one. This is going to have ramifications later on in the U.S. This one that starts here. Crazy hatchet ladies. Temperament. Yes, the temperance movement. Solid. Good job. Yes, the temperance movement, right? What is the temperance movement about? Do you remember that? Banning alcohol. Yes, temperance movement's about no alcohol. Yep, no liquor. What else? Anything else? Are we missing some? There's some we're missing. No, prohibition's later. Prohibition's after. Prohibition is, that's why temperance is important, right? Temperance is like the baby prohibition. Prohibition will come as a result of temperance. What are some other movements that are being made? Where else do we add reforms? Where else do we change? What else gets better? So working conditions get better, right? People are moving to ban alcohol. What are some other reform movements? Well, we said labor unions, but labor reform. Living conditions is really good, right? So what's that? What's the root of that? What are people trying to fix? Why are living conditions so bad? Because everybody's rich and well off? Slums, yeah. Civil service, yes, changing sewage. Populist movement, yes, populist movement's really good. Civil service, yes, solid. Change. Basically, you got populism, you got civil service, you have the removal of those slums, right? The poor living conditions. That's through populism. That's through trying to close the gap between who and who. Where does the gap keep getting wider during the Gilded Age? It keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and further and further and further apart. The rich and the poor, right? So that fixing that gap is good, right? So in all these movements try to do that. No, abolitionist movement is pre-Civil War. This is Gilded Age, post-Civil War. So solid, guys. Those are really good reform movements. Here's what I will recommend to you, and this is about all I can recommend to you. If you want a good way to review and you're confident in your, so here's the two things I would say you could do to review. Watch the Heimler video on DBQs just to refresh yourself, because he will explain them way better than me, even if I had a full class period. And review the reform movements in the Gilded Age. So watch the Heimler video, review the reform movements of the Gilded Age. And I'll make a post on the Google Classroom about this with the link to the video. But watch the video on DBQs and review the reform movements. That's where you're going to find the most help for your DBQ. And with that being said, guys, let's talk about the exit ticket. So if you do not see the exit ticket in Google Classroom, let me know, because I posted it to just virtual group 3. So only virtual group 3 should be seeing it. So if you can't see it, let me know. I don't think the numbers add up. So some of you are in here that probably need access to it. So you got to send me a quick message in the Zoom. Stay on the Zoom, of course. Let me just talk to you about what we're doing, right? So impact of yellow journalism on imperialism. Explain the significance and effects of the Spanish-American War, and reasons why the U.S. were interested in expanding their borders. Why did the U.S. want to go out further past the lower 48? So with that being said, again, send me a message here in the